Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really exciting knife unboxing video to share with you guys. I have something that was sent to me by Blade HQ, and we can kind of see through this, so you can probably guess what it is. Thanks so much to Blade HQ for sending this in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Now, this is a new variation of this knife, and it is absolutely available right now. I will link it right down below in the description. It does help my channel when you... Is this sealed? No. I haven't actually opened it up yet. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that is entirely up to you. All right. So what do we have here? What the heck kind of crazy Demko 8020 do we have this time? Oh boy, look at that. We got some carbon fiber scales. Those actually have a little bit of texturing on there. Oh, I didn't realize that. That is a nice little bonus. Very cool. So what we have here is another shark's foot, and I'll tell you that's for the EDC versions of this knife. Like when I say that, I mean the ones I'm actually going to carry. I'm gonna show off some other 8020s here in just a second, but for the ones I'm going to carry, I always do the shark's foot blade. That's just a preference. You can get a drop point blade if you want, or a clip point, or whatever they call it. This is in CPM 20 CV, which is cool. They have, outside of the S35 VN versions, finally another stainless option here, and outside, of course, the AUS 10 versions, which, But yeah, that's really cool. So now you can get a version of this in CPM 20 CV. They come in carbon fiber, of course, which is not a bad option, right? They also come in a couple of different forms of G10, and of course you can get either a drop point blade or a shark's foot blade. Now, this platform at this moment in time in 2023 is very much modifiable. In fact, a lot of people buy these with, the intention of modifying them. And I think that's a really good idea because you can kind of there's a bunch of different steels now. I mean, you can get the base one in AUS 10A, right, which I actually have right here. Now, it's been modified already with some titanium scales. You can get S35 VN and G10. You can get CPM 20 CV now and G10 or carbon fiber. You can get titanium and CPM 3V. If I'm not mistaken, there's even a version of it is there a version in 3V that's not titanium, but you can get either textured titanium or smooth. And then, of course, this is the one that always causes confusion, the actual USA Demko 8020, which is much larger and it is much larger too. It is much larger and much more difficult to find. These guys are substantially thicker, and these are actually made by Demko here in the United States. Now, part of the reason I have all of these out here is because there are actually differences there's obviously a difference between, we shouldn't have the big guy out here, I just wanted to show it. There are actually differences between these three major variations of this knife, and this is important for any of you who plan to modify them, because let me tell you something, I'm going to modify this one, and I have already taken apart this version and this version to learn that there are reasons that you may or may not be able to modify these things. So I'm going to save you guys some time. I like original goat scales, and I have some actually for the 8020.5, some beautiful titanium scales. These titanium scales that you can see right here will not fit this version or this version. Why? Let me tell you. Number one, these scales right here, this is going to be the case with a lot of aftermarket scales for these things. They are milled out on the inside because they need to accept a liner. So the reason they won't work with the titanium versions of this knife is because there are no liners. And believe it or not, the hardware and everything underneath is actually set up to, accommodate for this setup. Furthermore, this pivot setup is not the same as this pivot setup. It is barrel shaped. Now it has the little captive oval, but the actual pivot barrel is barrel shaped and not D-shaped. This guy is D-shaped, but it looks the same as this one, right? On top of that, this also has the liner. Now this version has a D-shaped barrel, but look at that. the pivot, which is the older version of the pivot that's I think is only included on the older AUS-10A models, perhaps the newer AUS-10A models. This setup is exactly the same as this setup other than the pivot. If we look at these aftermarket scales, you can see here that these guys have a much larger area. If you look on the other side, this has a much larger area and is supposed to accept that inner oval that keeps the pivot captive. Now, these technically will work on these older versions of the AUS-10A models with this pivot, but you're going to have a really weird button head pivot sticking out right here, and then you're going to have this gunk trap around the outside of the pivot. So, if you're going to check out original goat scales or, like Flytanium scales, for example, it's not going to work unless you plan to, in this case, like if you're going to take this and replace the entirety of, the scales. But again, your hardware is not set up the same way. We have a backspacer on this guy and we've got standoffs on this guy. So these scales, the only version of this knife that they will actually work with is, I'm guessing, definitely the 20CV versions, unless I find out there's yet some other change in there, or the G10 / carbon fiber versions of the S35VN variations, right? Basically, and if there is a 3V version, basically the versions of this knife that have this pivot but have scales and a liner, that's where it's going to work. And I've noticed looking around at a lot of the other scales, unless you get aftermarket Flytanium scales that are specifically meant for this older version of the 8020, that's going to be the way to go. You obviously can't take these Flytanium scales and put them on this guy because you have this pivot to deal with, right? And underneath, the scale and everything, all the internals have been milled out to accept, scales like this. So, I thought that might save you guys some time. Now, in another video, I'm going to replace the scale on this guy, but I just thought that was really interesting, that we have so many different versions of this knife and that you have to be careful. If you're buying these things for customization, there are things to consider. A lot of times when you're buying the aftermarket scale, it will say in the description, hey, this is what they're meant for, this is what they will and won't work for, right? But we have quite a bit of variation in lots of different places on these knives, right? Whether it be the liners or the scales or the backspacer or whatever. Getting back to this variation of the knife, this is really nice. This is operating exactly like the other versions, right? No blade play, up, down, left to right. Awesome manipulation. My suggestion, as always, is to replace the pocket clip because I think that the Lynch clip works much better. But this is very cool, and honestly, that little bit of micro texturing on the carbon fiber really takes it up a notch because this type of carbon fiber is not my favorite. In fact, let me tell you something. I think that this is actually a carbon fiber laminate, unless I'm just very, very wrong. Should we zoom in here and take a look? Let's take a look. I could be wrong. No, I think that is actually solid carbon fiber. But it's just that really, you can see the texturing here, though. That's very nice. Fit and finish is absolutely gorgeous on this thing. But it is. I thought it was a laminate. No, it's solid carbon fiber. But it's just when it's flat like that, especially when it's shiny. I'm thankful it's not the standard shiny stuff, but when it's that real shiny stuff that we see on cheaper knives, that's a real bummer. But very beautiful, very cool knife. And obviously available at Blade HQ right now. So I'll link it down below. I think all of these different versions are actually still available. Of course, you also have the option of a drop point or clip point blade. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Thanks so much to Blade HQ for sending this in. Like I said, I've got plans for this knife, so stay tuned for that. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.